would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a post-Halloween edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. I hope you all had a fantastic Halloween. Unfortunately, my house doesn't get any trick-or-treaters. Lots of hills, no sidewalks, no streetlights. I've always kind of been bummed by that. But some great neighborhoods in my town. And my boys are out there taking advantage of it as we speak. Because I'm sure you've guessed by now, I actually tend to do these shows the day before, the day you get them. So they're out there having fun. And I hope your kids enjoyed it as well. Or you did. As always, the best way to reach out is through the website at therebelbroker.com. Feel free to head on over there, click on Contact the Rebel Broker to send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. If you'd prefer to email me directly, send those to therebel@therebelbroker.com. While you're there, why don't you click on the Take the Survey to Support the Show button. Once you've done that, you will be in the running for a $50 Amazon gift card. We've already drawn one for October. We'll be drawing one the next couple of days for November. So go ahead, head on over. Just use the same email address both times you're asked in the survey. Answer the survey questions, and you are in. And as I promised, we're going to go ahead and do a drawing. But before I did the drawing, I wanted to make sure everyone was aware that it was going to happen. So if you're hot to get your name into the mix, make sure and do that today. I am going to draw the name at 5 o'clock Pacific time on November 1st. So you should have heard this show by then. So make sure to get your name in. And of course, it'll remain in there. We're going to do another drawing at the beginning of December. So everyone who has so far put their name in or been so kind as to take the survey and use the same email address both times will absolutely be entered for another go at it next month. So you've got that going for you. Also, if you'd like to join the ranks of the Rebel Underground, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222, and you will become a member, and you'll get sort of the inside scoop. You'll get content that other folks won't get access to. It'll only be distributed to folks on that list. So head on over and head on over to your cell phone and text the word Rebel Broker to 44222. Follow the prompts after that, and you will be all set to go. And the site is continuing sort of its slow walk towards change. As I mentioned a few shows back, we've gone and put the Amazon store up on there, so you'll be able to review books, purchase products and stuff through Amazon. And through doing it through the website, you'll be supporting the show. I'm going to be changing that link from the store to support the show. And then under there will be a variety of things you can do to support the show. Of course, you can shop at Amazon, which obviously will help out the show. Then there'll also be a page for sponsors where you can go and check out different sponsors and see if any of them interest you and potentially take advantage of those offerings to, again, support the show. And I want to thank all of you who've been doing that. I recently added a single advertisement to the front page of the website, and I want to thank all of those of you who have been taking advantage of that. And if you see something that sounds worthwhile to you, clicking on it is just another way that I'm trying to move forward with growing the show and helping to make it the absolute best source of information for you relating to real estate. And all the other wonderful things we talk about. What are we going to? Well, today was sort of started out with focusing on women and their reemergence into the marketplace, and it grew into buying groups that we probably all want to keep our eyes on. And I'm always hesitant with this kind of thing because when we're talking about generalities, it's always important to remember that while I hand this sort of information out, what you really want to do is get your local ground truth. I know we talk about that a lot, but it's really important. If you sort of take what's happening generically across the country and you use that to inform decisions and work you're already doing in your own local marketplace, fantastic. That's exactly the way I'm hoping that you're using it. But if you're sort of taking what I'm saying in terms of let's use the single women example, if that's not a truth in your local marketplace, if your ground truth isn't that single women are really starting to come out and buy in greater numbers, well, if you're making decisions based on how you're marketing your property, or if you're flipping and trying to make decisions based on that being the truth, you really need to make sure that that's what's happening in your local marketplace. Mostly you'll be able to figure these sorts of things out by talking to a local professional. And sometimes you'll just get a feeling for it. I'd love to be able to give you some just ironclad ways to figure it out, but sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. I know that I have seen that happen in my local marketplace, where I've seen a greater number of single women. 3 of my buyers over the last year were all single women who were purchasing. So I think that that's an interesting element, and it's something that I think is a good thing to understand from the standpoint of sellers and also investors who may want to be pushing elements of their investment in a direction that appeals to the largest number of people. So by sort of keeping the broader number of folks out there in the buying pool in mind and what their interests might be, I think it makes it possible for you to give yourself a much more attractive product to offer these folks. Now, another thing I wanted to hit on today is sort of retouching on something that we really spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year going over, and that's setting goals, coming up with strategies, those types of things. And we hit that pretty hard, and all of those shows are up and available. So you can go and check the archives at therebelbroker.com and find those shows. But I wanted to, and I don't know if we mentioned it at the time, I'm almost sure we did about a month after we started that series, but I wanted to remind folks that nothing is more reinvigorating to the process of achieving your goals than doing an honest self-assessment of what you've accomplished, what you've missed, opportunities that you didn't jump on that you now wish you had. You know, we're far enough into the year now that you can look back on the things that you've done. You can look back on the properties that you've evaluated. You can look back on the estimates that you made. Because remember, one of the things that we talked about in terms of creating those goals wasn't necessarily going out and buying a property, but getting a process down where you analyze those properties and seeing how well your analysis did. Because as one of the things we talked about in the beginning, you analyze where you think your local market was going to go in terms of rent increases, in terms of property value increases, those types of things. Now is a great time to look back and see how correct you were or how incorrect you were. Now, clearly the best time to do it is going to be at a year end, but as I've mentioned before, I like to do it quarterly. It's not always a religiously set date, but I'll frequently put it into my calendar just to remind me, so that that's something that I do, and I do a quick eval just to figure out where I am. And the reason I mention this is I did it a few days ago, and I was happy with some of my goals, but I wasn't happy with all of them. By now, I had hoped to be into my new property in terms of either having purchased a lot. Now, for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that my go-to here was to try and go down a path that's a little bit less traveled, but represented a greater return on potential investment. And that was to buy a unimproved lot and build a home on it. And unfortunately, with each lot that I would find, there was some substantial reason to not follow through in it. As I also mentioned before, it needed to meet several criteria. It needed to be a property that once I decided to move would be a lucrative rental. So that meant it needed to be a reasonable distance from the freeway for commuting needs, just so that I'm satisfying the greatest number of needs on the part of the folks who would later be renting. So that eliminated a lot of mountain and semi-mountain properties that are near here in Morgan Hill, simply because they would make the commute far too long. And it would be one of the properties they would tend to rent last because everybody's going to want to be closer to the commute. The other thing was I wanted to make sure it didn't have a lot of potential overhead in terms of insurance costs or hazards that were built directly into just where the lot was. And so I kept finding lots that were coming available that were in the worst flood zone. And normally that's not something that hugely concerns me. There's an awful lot of flood zone here. And usually if you're not in the worst part of it, you're fine. But this is the kind of area where even just in really strong rains, you find that these lots flood. So it wasn't something I was interested in getting involved in. And sure enough, when I consulted with various professionals on this, the amount of expense that I'd need to go to potentially compensate for this or deal with this were gigantic. So it just became more of a non-starter. So in recent months, I've leaned a little bit more towards finding an existing property in an area that works. And in order to do that, I have done what I've suggested you folks do. I've tried to follow paths of less desirable resistance, meaning 2 bedrooms that could potentially be converted into 3 bedrooms. So a house that was maybe 2 beds and 2 baths, those types of things. And unfortunately, I haven't reached that. So I've been trying to reevaluate my strategy, try to figure out if I'm not doing all I can be doing to make that goal happen in a more timely way. So what I'm suggesting is that all of you do the same. Now, that's sort of the review process I went through. I can't specifically tell you what review process you should go through because I don't know what your specific goal is. But you should absolutely take an honest assessment and look back and try to figure out what you've done right and what you've done wrong. And you need to do this from a standpoint of achieving a mission. You don't want to beat yourself up. It's just an opportunity for you to say, you know what, this didn't yield the results I wanted. What do I need to do differently? Or what can I try to do differently that will hopefully give me better results? This is a cycle that I find most successful investors use. It's not about beating yourself up. It's not and these aren't revelations that you need to share with anybody else. So if you're somebody who really has a problem with being critical in the face of other people, critical of yourself in the face of other people, I suggest you figure out a way to get past that, because I also think that if you have a partner in your life, having these kinds of discussions with that person can be very, very helpful for you. So maybe work on that, maybe make that a goal, to be more open with maybe a select few trusted partners that you think can maybe give you some decent feedback on what you're doing or what you're not doing. But at the very least, you want to reflect, figure out what you're doing, and see how it's working. And if it's not working, if you were thinking, I want to be at least in escrow by such and such a date on a property, or by the end of this year, I want to have purchased 2 properties and you've purchased none, it's time to start looking at what's causing that and figure out strategies to facilitate making it happen. And we've talked a lot about different ways to adjust your strategies as it relates to real estate. So hopefully one of those shows will be helpful for you in terms of doing that. Okay, so I just want to touch on that. It's a valuable thing that I do. I don't think we really discuss it enough. But in any event, there you go. I hope that's a helpful suggestion for you in terms of reaching your goals. And of course, this applies to everything, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be just a real estate thing. This is something you can apply to any goals that you have in your life, no matter what those are. Now we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here, so don't go away. We'll be right back after this. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We just spent a few minutes briefly discussing reviewing your goals, sort of looking back, reflecting on what you're doing and what you haven't done to try to figure out strategies that will help you get further along, particularly if you're looking back and you're seeing unreached goals. And again, I suggest strongly that you do these kinds of things every quarter with a really deep dive of every 6 months to figure out what you're doing wrong, or to figure out if you need more time or if you need to shift your focus, those types of things. But let's go ahead and jump into Interesting buyer groups to keep your eyes out for. Now, I'm extracting this from an article that's actually aimed more at real estate people. And it's talking about ways to, groups that you should identify as key players in the housing market all the way up to 2025. And sort of identify them, figure out what part they're playing in your area, those types of things. And I think this is a valuable thing to keep in mind for just about anyone. Now, for buyers, if you've got folks out there who are seeing these markets growing, you might expect to see more housing opportunities or more housing developments that actually incorporate items that would be attractive to these various groups. If you're an investor, whether it's for doing flipping or for renting, these are things to keep in mind because you're going to want to know how big of an influence they have on your market to determine how to give yourself the biggest edge on the competition. Remember, you're never alone in this, and sometimes you're not alone in terms of having folks on your team, but more frequently you're not alone in terms of folks who want the person you need to be interested in your property. And of course, markets always change, and while it may be true right now that sellers tend to be in the driver's seat for most markets, as we've talked about recently, that is likely to switch. That's likely to change over. And at some point soon, we're likely to see buyers at a point where they can discriminate in terms of what properties that they want to make an offer on, in terms of just supply and demand. They'll have a lot more to choose from, so they'll be able to pass over homes that they may have in previous markets jumped on immediately, simply because they just have tons of choices. So what it's about is making sure that you're providing them with no reasons to doubt that they should be renting your property or purchasing your flipped property or purchasing your home that's for sale. And by keeping these items in mind, and here's what's great, you can have a property that gives very broad appeal to an awful lot of different groups simply by sort of judiciously adapting different things into your property that appeal to each group. Now, we've talked about this in general terms before. If you go back to some shows earlier this year, we talked about different things you can do to your property that provide more appeal, that make you look better than the other properties. Everything from painting in ways that make your home as generically attractive as possible, right? No extreme palettes. You're just going for attracting that largest number of folks, getting the biggest number of eyeballs interested in your property. Well, with this data, and this is kind of interesting because it fits in. I almost said dovetails. See, that would have been one for Scott. He could have bugged me again via email about saying dovetailed. Number one on their list is women. This is very interesting because there were several articles. The National Association of Realtors, CNBC, they've all been putting out these articles about the single woman and the part that she's playing in the new marketplace. So let's talk about that for a second. Now, it doesn't mean that this is displacing the married couples. That's still going to be the lion's share of your quote unquote customer. Married couples make up the largest share of home buyers, 66%, and had the highest income at $99,200. Single women are increasing their role, though. Last year, the share of single women fell to its lowest point since 2002's 15%, but this year, they seem to be making a comeback. Single women represented 17% of the market this year, the highest point since 2011. So the point is, and I think this carries weight in both markets. I think this carries weight in both the rental and the home purchase marketplace. I think what we're simply seeing is single women sort of making up a larger chunk of the folks who are going out on their own. And since we are seeing an increase in the number of single women who are buying, that also kind of implies that there's at least a pretty decent supply of single women that are looking to do the renting, because typically before you're going to come and do some buying, you're going to do some renting. Now, there's a few examples here that they provide, and I noticed in all of them, these are women who already own a home and are planning to keep that, rent it, and move into another one. So that makes it kind of interesting, but I'd still think my argument actually holds water. So I think by providing appeal that will move directly towards certain segments of the marketplace, you're not necessarily doing yourself any harm. Let's see. All right, so let's move back to the overall group. So women, now according to the National Association of Realtors, women's buying power is strengthening their workforce numbers as their workforce numbers rise sharply. Women now earn 58% of all college degrees nationwide, and they earn more than their spouses 38% of the time. By 2025, the number of women in the workforce is expected to jump to 78 million, 8 million higher than the level in 2015. The working woman today is different than previous generations, according to these folks. 40 years ago, 68% of women in their late 20s had both a husband and a child. Today, that percentage has plunged to just 22%. Women may delay marriage or child rearing to focus on their jobs first. But single women have shown they are not afraid to step into home ownership alone. Single women accounted for 15% of all home purchases in 2015, while single men made up 9%, according to the National Association of Realtors. Now, of course, we also know that that number is now up to 17%. So it's just a growing number. And honestly, I think that it's likely to be something that persists. Now, there's something else that contributes to this. Because we're seeing this change in just really how people do things. And this is, I think, the second time we've had this conversation, but from a different angle. I'm starting to wonder about the lucrativeness of not 3-bedroom homes. And by that, I don't mean bigger than 3-bedroom. I mean 2-bedroom. For years, the 2-bedroom home has historically been worth less than the 3-bedroom, and by a greater amount than would be simply explained by the square footage or the fact that the one has an extra room. It's just simply been one of those deals where there were far more people interested in 3-bedroom than 2-bedroom homes. What I'm finding now is that's less so in terms of the single folks who are shopping. Now, almost every single person that I have worked with over the last year has not been focused on the 3+ bedroom. They've been focused on the 2+. In 2 of those cases, there was a child involved, so that second bedroom was designated as the bedroom for the child, but there was also this interest, a willingness to entertain a 3-bedroom house if the price worked as an office or that sort of thing. But because the price differences were typically so offset because of the supply and demand issues pertaining to it, the 2-bedroom usually remained the better choice. You typically would get more bang for the buck. So I'm starting to reevaluate my own bias a little. I haven't seen a huge change yet, but if you buy into this theory, it sure does make the 2-bedroom property far more potentially interesting. So and in certain areas, if you can see, as we've looked at with other areas, if you can see tons of different 2-bedroom homes getting rented or 2-bedroom properties getting rented, you've probably found yourself a market in which that's a normal thing. This is usually pretty common in downtown areas right around colleges and universities, those types of things. Okay. Next on their list, and they give some advice. This article gives advice on how to jump on that specific market. Let's see what they say. Women are expected to have a larger influence on the commercial office market. That's kind of interesting. Female executives likely will have more of a say in office space selection, given their increasing dominance in the workforce. They'll likely favor shared space and e-commuting because of the financial savings and increased flexibility. Therefore, commercial markets may see fewer square feet per employee as companies transition to a hotel-like atmosphere where people rent a desk for the day. Now, there's an interesting corollary to that as well, because what does that say to you? What's the other side of that? If we go into this executive theory, the flip side of the business doing it is, well, the property then should be connected, right? You would want to have a property that it already has listed as a feature, easy access to the internet, high-speed internet, those types of things, great space for the home work environment, those types of things that will attract this kind of person, this kind of woman buyer who's got a professional life where this may be a bigger thing for them. So these are all things that you'd want to add to the list of great stuff that you're offering in terms of facilitating building an interest on the part of this particular group. Next on the list is immigrants. According to this article, immigrants are expected to comprise more than half of the U.S. population growth by 2023 if current trends continue. In 10 years, more than 1 of every 7 residents will be an immigrant. Many of the immigrants coming to the U.S. are highly educated middle and upper class families with substantial buying power, according to the Uli report. Quote, these consumers are vital to the economy, but common wisdom about the ways they form households, buy homes, and behave in the marketplace no longer holds. According to the report, immigration has shifted from impoverished refugees walking across the border or landing via boat to affluent middle and upper class families fleeing their native lands after decades of amazing economic growth. All right, so they give some lists, some interesting stuff here, what your brokerage can do. So let's see what they say the brokerage could do, because I think there'd be a lot of commonalities between what would be good things for the brokerage to do and what would be good things for you to do. First, and I agree with this one, take a look at your market's own demographics makeup. What does diversity look like in your area? How is it changing? How can you reach those in diverse areas? Consider adding a bilingual interpreter. No, that's all great, depending on the language spoken. But in terms of you being a small individual investor, someone who's doing the flip, someone who's doing rentals, you're going to want to try to understand how you can make your property appeal to different cultural groups. And the problem there is I can't tell you that. You need to figure out what group it is that is making up the largest percentage of the immigrant population and adapt to that. Figure out what are some of the cultural things that they're very into. To give you some examples, Chinese clients, and not just clients from China, but also Japan and other Asian countries, are very much into feng shui. I have brought clients to homes where all they did was walk through the front door, realize that the stairs were not where they should be and that the rooms weren't evenly distributed to the left and the right of the entrance. And that was it. They were done. There wasn't enough feng shui. It can also relate to numbers. The address of the home on the street can be a problem. I've noticed that if you have a lot of eights, for instance, with a lot of Asian immigrants, that's an important thing for them. They like to see eights a lot. Now, those are a couple of specifics that may not apply to you at all. It depends on really where the folks are coming from. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with recognizing what is culturally attractive and recognizing that fact and promoting it when you're out there looking for folks who are potentially going to be interested in your property. Now, and this is going to apply to rentals as well as properties that you're going to sell. So find out what those numbers are. Those are things that you can actually probably find out pretty easily. I would imagine that the Chamber of Commerce is going to be aware of those types of things. City Hall is probably going to be aware of that type of stuff. So it's absolutely something that you can keep track of and better cater to. Let's see. Now, to sort of further that, they actually mention this later in the article. Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate and the Asian Real Estate Association of America did a survey of 500 Chinese American buyers. 86% said feng shui played a role in a future home buying decision. 79% said they'd pay more for a home with feng shui principles. So that's kind of interesting, right? If you know that and what's interesting is there's a variety of different ways. There's feng shui you can deal with, which is the actual just placement of furniture in the home. And there's feng shui you can't. You can't change the floor plan of your home. But if that is a huge influencer, and I've actually had to do this, I can remember we had this is going back quite a while now, but we had a home in an area that was very much desired on the part of immigrants from Asia. So we actually had someone who would come in who knew feng shui, who would arrange everything with that in mind, and it made a difference in a lot of deals. So it's absolutely something to keep in mind. Next, number 3 on their list is retirees. Baby boomers aren't softening their buying power into their golden years, but they're very diverse in how they're exercising it in retirement. By 2025, 66 million Americans will be over the age of 65. Now, I think we did almost an entire show on this in terms of marketplaces that are very desirable to retirees and how to cater to those folks. And there was also some interesting data on how things had changed with retirees in terms of decisions about staying where they were or tending to buy the home they're going to stay in longer earlier. But we are seeing them as a buying group increasing in size. Let's see. By 2025, 66 million Americans will be over the age of 65. That's 38% more than in 2015. Young retirees' needs and lifestyles are varied, which can create a variety of customer segmentations within the group. For example, 19% 65 to 69-year-olds still work full-time. Those born in the 1950s are still maintaining active lifestyles and are spending their unprecedented net worth, often on real estate. So in those situations, you're going to want to cater to things that are going to tend to be most desirable to folks in those age groups. And we talked about a few of those things. Less stairs is better. Certain levels of assistance in the bathroom, hold bars to hold on to for safety, those types of things are nice touches that aren't going to alienate any other part of the marketplace, but are absolutely going to be things that are noticed by folks that are in that retirement age range. Let's see here. Due to the diverse needs of retirees, the ULI report says that segmentation of reaching this population is key. Some of your real estate professionals may target the 1950s innovators, more entrepreneurial people who have active lifestyles and are spending at higher rates than net worth that they've accrued over the years, while others may corner the 1940s achievers, the 19% of 65 to 69-year-olds who still work full-time and continue to achieve financially today, and still others may prefer to work with the 1930s savers shaped by frugality in childhood and a longer than expected lifespan. They're searching for ways to make their money stretch. We have a special task in working with seniors in the transition, whether it's helping them to downsize or even transition into an assisted living facility. This is another untapped target market that isn't being focused on nearly enough. There are so many issues with getting them to move from their homes and transitioning to different living experiences. So, this is one I'm a little bit more informed of than a lot of other folks, simply because when I was working with my father over in the Santa Cruz County area, this was something I did on a regular basis. He lives in a retirement community, sort of. It's one of those parks where you have to be over 55 in order to, or over 50, I think, in order to live there. So it was one of those things where part of what I did was help folks transition into that home, perhaps from a single family residential home, and then also transition out of there into an assisted living scenario. So, and that's absolutely an area where you can get a great deal of satisfaction in terms of catering to the needs of that community. Some of my most memorable stories or feel-good moments are from helping folks in that community get where they wanted to be and to be comfortable. So if that's something you want to do as an investor, where you can provide the things that will fit the needs of these folks, it's definitely a feel-good moment. You can make yourself a little money, but you can also do something that's really helping folks out. Number 4 on their list, young adults, the millennials. The millennials are expected to drive the majority of new household growth over the next decade, although more slowly than their predecessors at forming new households. Now, remember, we did see a big jump in first-time buyers coming from the millennials group. They've delayed getting married and starting families, which is another reason why I think we may see a growth in the desirability of the smaller property. The 2-bedroom property may show increases in desirability. I know that one interesting thing is I did have a couple of properties that were 2-bedroom properties over the last year that I listed, and I sold them in record time. I actually sold them faster than the typical 3-bedroom was selling for. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I tend to do that anyway. I tend to beat whatever the statistics are. But I think in terms of other 2-bedrooms in the community, I beat it by more than a month and a half. I mean, it was crazy fast. So that might be an indication that trend actually started perhaps a while ago. But again, even those, the 2 I sold in those cases were not single individuals. Those 2 listings actually ended up going to married couples, one of them with children. So now we've spent a lot of time trying to sort of decipher what the millennial is about. And I've made no secret of the idea that I actually think it's difficult to pigeonhole millennials, or that they are in reality that much different from anyone who came before them. My argument's always been that they're a product of the problems that they're facing. In my area, prices are ridiculous. Employment is an issue. A lot of them are saddled with far more debt than folks previous to them were. I don't know how long ago this trend ended, but I know when I went to college, I managed to graduate without any debt. I worked jobs while I was going through college. I managed to save up some money ahead of time. So I was able to get through without finishing with, I think I finished with a little debt, but it was literally a few $1,000s, I think, that I had accumulated on a credit card. So, and from what I can see, those days are more or less behind us. It's ridiculously difficult for students to do that. So there's that dynamic. They come out with this debt that they're having to service as soon as they graduate. And again, that's another element that I think feeds into this idea of the 2-bedroom property that can be attractive for both purchasing and for rental, because I think there's a lot of delay in terms of the millennials built into what they're going to do. Now, what we've heard is that most of them don't want to jump on that train. They don't want to do the purchase of whatever will work for now. They want to purchase a home that they're going to buy and hold on to for an extended period of time. Something else that's a little bit unique to millennials and that previous generations always thought they'd get the starter home, they'd move on when the family got bigger, whereas the philosophy of a lot of them today is less that and more, I want to buy a house once and be done with it. So that, again, feeds into this delay, which I think in a lot of communities, particularly in ones like mine, feeds the idea that as an investor, maybe it's time to include that 2-bedroom house as a possibility for you investing, and not with the idea that I'm going to turn around and add a 3rd bedroom to it. Now, of course, buying under those circumstances where there's enough room for you to do that would be fantastic, but you could be extremely profitable given the way the market appears right now without ever doing that, just by providing that as a rental property. All right, folks. I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight into the market, how things seem to be evolving, and how different segments of the buying marketplace are starting to emerge or at least be more dominant than others. And hopefully that'll help you come to some great conclusions on what you want to do with your rental or with your flip in terms of providing features that are going to apply to the biggest number of folks in every one of these segments. Thanks for spending your valuable time listening to little old me. I do appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.